Barb Bunnell, Purdue Nutrition Education Advisor, and I'm here at Food Finders getting ready to teach you how to plan meals and prepare during these difficult times. So we've all heard the question, probably more so lately than in the past, of what's for dinner. And I know at my house I've gotten really tired of that question because I used to be able to go out to dinner or have people over, and it was just a little bit more planning, and now it's what's for dinner has a lot of really anxiety attached to it at our house because I'm not always sure what I'm going to have. So I hopefully you have conquered that, but if you haven't, let's just think a little bit about what we feel when we hear that, what's for dinner. Sometimes I'm anxious, sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm aggravated, sometimes I'm like, I don't know and I don't care. So I just ask all of you to think what you do when someone asks you that. So today we're just going to talk about and find our way through what anxiety comes and how we can eliminate it. So we're going to learn how to take just a few minutes, maybe 30 minutes every couple of weeks to plan and to prepare. And I know, thank goodness for Food Finders and all of the food that they've been able to pass out during these times. It's one of those things that I just got through canning like 200 cans of fruits and vegetables for the winter. So now it's going to be, what do I have in the pantry, as opposed to what can I go to the grocery store. So many of us right now have found that we don't go to the grocery store as often. So we really do have to plan and think about what are those meals that we're going to have down the road. So you don't always know what you're going to get from Food Finders. There again, you're going to plan and prepare and think down the line as to how can I save this or store it properly so that when I get ready to have it, I have more meals off of one item than I would have had. So planning is really important, and 30 minutes is all it takes. And I say that because as we go through recipes and we go through what does everybody in the family like, it may seem like it takes longer than that, but when you actually sit down and start planning your meals, you're going to find that 30 minutes will get you for 2 or 3 weeks with no problem. I like to look at recipes online. My husband loves to look at recipes online, so we get a lot of our recipes from the internet, but I also have a family cookbook that I have resorted to probably more right now than I have in the last 10 years, just because I've cooked a lot of meals in the last 6 months that I would not have normally have cooked. Making those recipes, making them simple, is one of the easiest ways to think about the recipe that you're going to make. If it's very complicated or if it takes a lot of ingredients, we're probably going to skip it because that's not what our life is like. And now that we're back into the full swing and the kids are back in school, we still have limited amounts of time. So an easy recipe is an easier recipe than one that's very, very difficult to put together. I also like to think about what I have in the pantry, or what's on sale at the grocery store. If it's on sale, then I probably am more apt to say we're going to have this week as opposed to the other. So when I do my plan, I have this little sheet. I know it'll show up backwards on the video, but I'll show it to you. It's plan and know what's for dinner. And this is one that I use just to give myself an idea of what I'm going to plan. And the two things that I always put on there first are the main dish and the side dishes. The main dish, especially because you can always add into that side with the side dishes. The main dish is really the one that we have to plan the most for. We know that when we eat at home, we eat smart, we eat healthy. And we don't have the same temptations as we do when we go out. Or even when we don't plan, we have bigger temptations. I'm a real good one that when I don't plan, I might find myself with a bowl of cereal for dinner, and that's really not where I should. It's an okay dinner, but it's not what I should have planned to have. I wouldn't have planned that. With us eating at home, we control better not only what we choose, we control the calories, we control the fat, we control the sugar, the salt, all of those things we control when we eat at home, as opposed to when we go out to a restaurant. Because, or even if we buy pre-made food, we don't control how much some things are in it that we can control when we cook at home. So cooking at home is really the safest and the healthiest way for us to live. It's also the cheapest. May not seem like it at the time, but it truly is cheaper to eat at home than it is to eat out. So making better choices is really our goal when we're planning our meals for the family, to make good choices so that everyone's full and they like what they have. So when you get that question, what's for dinner, you can have a smile on your face when you tell the kids that it's going to be meatloaf, or it's going to be beef and noodles, and they really like those, but you know you're going to put a lot of extra fruits and vegetables with those things that they really like. Eating healthy is really the biggest choice that we have when we cook at home. And eating healthy when we go to the grocery store, we're going to avoid some aisles at the grocery store so that we get the healthiest food. And right now, with fruits and vegetables being so available, that we want to make sure that we're using a lot of those as being fresh or even frozen, so that we get more than half of our plate in fruits and vegetables. So as you remember, our plate is supposed to be half fruits and vegetables, half grains and protein, and then your low-fat dairy items. So right now, it's okay if this much of your plate is fruits and vegetables, because there's so many fruits and vegetables that are available. Your protein and grains can be a little bit less, just because this is so available and so cheap right now. And I'm sure at the pantry they're getting a lot more fruits and vegetables than what they do in January. So take advantage of them, because this is a good time to get those healthy fruits and vegetables. And we know that fruits and vegetables help us to lower our risk for different kinds of diabetes, different kinds of cancers. So having more fruits and vegetables right now, that is really where I don't even know that you have to plan. You just have to plan which ones your family likes, as opposed to do I have a whole half a plate full of those, because it's easy to get those. Apples are just coming in, so there's so many different things you can do with apples that this one, fruits should be no problem either. Planning, as I said before, is going to help us save money down the road, and it also is going to help us to better utilize our time when we come to cooking. Shopping, we need to make a list. Fixing the meal is easier when you have a plan, because you're actually going to stick to the plan. If you don't have a plan and you just go in the kitchen, you may end up having macaroni and cheese, hot dogs, and applesauce. And although that's an okay meal, it's not probably the first choice that you would have had. If you had thought about it, you might have said, well, we can have, a hamburger and cottage cheese and broccoli and tomatoes, as opposed to that macaroni and cheese that has a lot of extra things in it that it's not as good for us in hot dogs. And then just eating together. That's the other piece of fixing your food at home and planning, is that you take the time to eat with your family. So that right there is nourishment, just having the time to eat together. And I know during this last 6 months being together so much, it was pretty easy to not want to eat together all the time. But some of the best conversations we had were around the kitchen table or the dining room table when we were sitting down to eat. We also want to make sure that, and I'll just give you a little snippet of this, I'm not going to go through with it as far as how to do it, but while you're making that meal or you're planning that meal, make sure that you take time to plan to move throughout the day. We each need, as an adult, 30 minutes a day of activity, and that can be as simple as standing at your counter like I am right now and you're just marching, or you can be raising your hands. You can do all kinds of different activities while you're standing right there in the kitchen, just to get activities. If you're able to get outside and play in that, that's all great with your kids. But if you don't have that time, then having that 30 minutes of standing in the kitchen doing the dishes after dinner and making some exercises with it will definitely give you exercise that you need. So just remember that planning what we eat is important, but also planning what we're going to do for exercise is important. And as the days get shorter and they get darker, it's even easier to forget about exercise, where the summer it was really easy to get out there and do different things. So planning is important when you think about how much money do I have to spend and where do I want to spend it. So I like to think about those main dishes as to how I can use that main dish. And I always say I'm a lazy cook because I like to cook once and serve 3 meals from that one cook. So I may make meatloaf tonight, and we may have meatloaf sandwiches tomorrow. And then maybe a couple days later, I may break up that meatloaf and put mashed potatoes with it and make a shepherd's pie. So all of a sudden, I took one main dish and I turned it into 2 or 3 meals that were still healthy, and I didn't have to cook the way I did if I just stood there and said, I'm going to have this for today and this for tomorrow. Tacos is another one that I like to make the taco meat up ahead of time and freeze it. So then when the grandkids come and it's crazy, I can just pull some meat out and we can start making tacos. We can also then turn around and make nachos the next night. Or I may take all of the meat that's left over, and it may not be a lot, but throw it together with beans and chicken broth and make a taco soup. So all of a sudden, that one day that I stood there cooking turns into 3 meals. So planning those main dishes so that they can be stretched is really, really important. And with fruits and vegetables, as I keep saying that they're so readily available right now, is making sure that we use them in lots of different ways. If someone said to me in July, when I tasted my first ripe tomato, that I would be tired of them by September, I would have said they were crazy. But typically I am. This year I found lots of different ways to do tomatoes, so that last night, in fact, I just took a little bit of mozzarella cheese and some red wine vinaigrette and put over it and with my tomatoes, and it tasted totally different than that sliced tomato I had back in July. So you don't always plan that, but having some of those things to stretch that vegetable is important. The other one that I use a lot is squash. And most people don't use squash except just to make, one butternut squash or a spaghetti squash. I love to just grind it up and puree it a little bit, and then I add it into every sauce that I make. So if I make spaghetti sauce, if I make a meatloaf, you name it, I'm gonna throw a little bit of my frozen squash into that. No one knows it's there because squash always takes the flavor of whatever's being cooked with. So it's a great vegetable, and it was very, very plentiful at my house this summer, to use in lots of different ways, and it's a way to get extra nutrients in your body that you wouldn't be expecting. So planning is really about the main dish, and then looking and saying, if I've got my plate, do I have everything here? So that meatloaf has got some it has protein in it, it has some grains in it, has some vegetables in it, but not a whole serving. But at the same time, I'm getting the beginnings of a lot of what's on my plate. You want to make sure that you're having a variety of all the food groups, and when I say variety, making sure that you're having both red and green vegetables, or you're having not just potatoes, but you've got a bright vegetable with it, because remember, your bright vegetables always give you more nutrition than your white or light vegetables. Making sure that we're having whole grains as much as we possibly can. And that one, sometimes it's hard, but if you like oatmeal, you can get a whole grain instantly just by having oatmeal. And then making sure that we're serving low-fat milk as opposed to whole milk. And if you have younger children, though, make sure that you're giving them, meeting the requirements of what they need for whole milk. You can get a lot of ideas from online from choosemyplate.gov. And it's updated all the time with recipes and different ideas of how to eat healthy. You can also go to the Purdue site, which is eatgatherandgo.org, and it will also talk about free programs that we have available to help you eat healthy. But using those two resources will give you recipes that are healthy and that are easy to follow. One of the number one reasons that all of us like to eat out is because it's convenient, not because it's healthy and not because it's cheap. It's because it's convenient. So if I've not learned anything during this pandemic is that convenience is really not as important as eating healthy and having a plan as to what I'm going to have. So when you're planning, make sure that you make a list of the things that you have in the pantry and things that you need to get. And I try to only go to the grocery store. Well, now I have my food, my groceries delivered to me, but I try to only go once or twice a month. And with that, and I don't know how many times all of you come to Food Finders, but you go through that box and you see what all you have, and then you can sit there and say, I can plan what I have. If you come to Food Finders 3 times a week, then you've got an easy way to plan for the next couple of weeks if that's what you're doing. Just making sure that we put it down on a piece of paper so that it truly holds us accountable. If I plan and say this is what I think I'm going to have, I want to change that plan 5 times. If I put it on a piece of paper, then I know I purchased the foods just like what's on that paper, and I'm going to follow that pretty close, and I'm going to save money by planning that way. Making sure that you have the right ingredients, not just the main ingredients, but some of the little extra things. And right now is another great time with spices, if you grew any of those outside, to start preserving them for the winter so that you don't have to buy spices when we get into the cold days of winter. Making sure that you include your family in the plan is also important, because I know I sometimes will ask my daughter, what does the kids really like, as opposed to what I want to fix for them, because there's no reason for me to bake a whole ham and no one in the family like it. So I try to make plans when they're going to be there or when we're going to have a full house that everyone's going to like what I make. If I do it for just my husband and I, we're going to eat what I make. So just making sure that we also think about how is the easiest, the quickest way to make it. If you can use a slow cooker, if you can use an air fryer, there's lots of ways. Your microwave, there's lots of ways to slow down how much time you have to spend in the grocery store or in the kitchen. The last thing I will leave you with as planning and knowing that you've got it all down on a piece of paper and you're ready to go to the grocery store is, will you follow the plan? And if you could do one thing differently, how would you change your plans? And it can be as simple as, I'm just going to do it for 2 days. That's okay. If that's all you can do is plan for 2 days, 2 days is better than no days, because 2 days will hopefully turn into 4 or 5 days, and then all of a sudden it's a monthly plan that you have. A lot of you are better at planning than probably I am. I think that sometimes when we have a fixed income, we have a fixed plan, we do a better job at planning and expanding what we have available to us. And also to think what you will do to overcome any of the food insecurities that you have right now. We don't always get to have, and I think this pandemic has shown us that we don't always get to eat what we like. I found myself, making some dishes that I would never have thought of before, and we delighted in them because it was something that we had in our pantry, and I didn't have to worry about, was I going to get groceries or not. So I think that planning and having a plan for the future is important, because then you're never shortchanged if all of a sudden tomorrow the lights go out, kind of like they did with the pandemic and we couldn't get food for a few days. You had a few things that you could survive on. So that's really having the plan is, to me, was very, very helpful, because I had a few things ahead that I could rely on until I could figure out how I was going to go to the grocery store or how you're going to get to Food Finders. So make sure to have fun, experiment, use the resources that you have, and certainly if you don't know what something is, ask. I know there's great resources here at Food Finders. You can go to the Eat Gather and Go or to Choose My Plate, and get ideas of how to cook something that maybe is in that box of food that you've never had before. So one that I get a lot of questions for is eggplant. It's very plentiful right now. If you don't know how to cook it, don't say, oh, I don't like this. Say, how can I experiment and find a way to use it, so that maybe that plan all of a sudden goes a little different because that eggplant turned out so well. So, and that's how I figured out how to use squash, was I don't like squash. My grandkids don't like squash, so once I learned how to puree it and put it in everything, we all love squash because we don't know we're eating it. So just have fun and remember to plan, and not just think about today, but think about what tomorrow could look like, and hopefully we can all eliminate "what's for dinner, Mom" out of our vocabulary. Thanks, and have fun.